survey of the New Testament. Last week we finished up Lesson 8 and started on Lesson 9. Got a few of those questions in, so we'll talk about them. God no longer overlooks what? Okay, ignorance. Paul was arrested and tried at where? Where was the city? Okay, Jerusalem. The Lord told Paul, be of good cheer, you're going to bear witness for me in Rome. So at that point, Paul knew that one way or the other, he was going to go to Rome, wasn't he? Paul tried before. We talked about Jewish council, Felix, Festus, Agrippa, and then eventually he's going to go because God had told him that he would be before Caesar. And as we finished up Lesson 8, that kind of takes us to the end of the book of Acts, the book of history of the early church. And now we're going to get into, starting with Lesson 9, some of the favorite passages. I don't want to say more important passages because they're all important, but the ones that we know a little better. And so we're going to talk about those, and we did talk about 2 or 3 last week. So we'll briefly mention them again. Romans 1:16, the message to the Romans by Paul. I'm not ashamed of the gospel. It's the power of God unto salvation to everyone that believeth, to the Jew first, and then also to the Greek. And we see that, and we've seen that play out in the book of Acts. You have to couple what we're reading now, these letters, these epistles that Paul, Peter, James, John, that they're writing, and go back in Acts and you can plug them in. Oh, this happened while this was going on, or this was written because of what was taking place. And perfect example of that, and we'll talk about it later, what was going on in Corinth. We can see that. Paul visits Corinth. Paul stays in Ephesus for a couple years, and we can kind of plug those in. Paul said all men have done what? They've sinned. Romans 3:23 comes short of the glory of God. They were lacking. We failed. God's glory, His honor, His dignity, His righteousness, His goodness. Gospel frees men from what? Sin's one. The wrath of God, sin, the law. Frees us from condemnation. We all have that freedom because of Jesus. Jesus is the one that made us free. I think it states that Romans 8, verses 1 and 2. I think that's where we got to. All right, so question number 80. Kind of ambiguous, the right word for that. There's a lot of things that Christians are. So what are we talking about here? If you look at the scripture that was on your sheet, from Romans 8, 16 and verses 16 and 17. What are Christians? Children of God. That makes us joint heirs with Christ. Joint heirs with Christ. All right? So let's look at that. Romans 8, 16 and 17. Somebody read, if you're there. Read Romans 8, 16 and 17.
The Spirit itself bears witness with our spirit that we are the children of God. And if children, then heirs, heirs of God, and joint heirs with Christ. If so be that we suffer with Him, that we may be also glorified together.
Pretty straightforward statement there. Okay, so let's break it down a little bit so that we can remember it better. The first thing it says is that you can know that this is the truth, this is accurate, because the Spirit bears witness. Okay? The Spirit says that it's true. The Spirit Himself bears witness to the fact. Notice that, not to the assumption, not to the whim, but to the fact that we are children of God. And then what does it say? If we're children of God, then we're heirs of God. That's important, isn't it? You have to be in the right relationship with God. You have to be His child. But if you're His child, you are an heir. And if we're heirs of God, then it says that we are joint heirs with Christ. So what does that mean? We know what an heir is, someone that would get an inheritance. Okay? Someone that shares an inheritance would be a joint heir. So what is that inheritance? Okay? So what is that? What is our inheritance? If we're a child of God, what is our inheritance from God? Heaven, salvation, being saved. Okay? Blessings. Okay? That would be our inheritance. So if we're joint heirs with Christ, what do we have to do in order to be a joint heir with Christ? What does it say? King James said suffer. Is that right, Derek? Did you read that? We have to suffer?
Yes, suffer with Him.
What does that mean, suffer? We think of suffering as something associated with pain and misery a lot of times. But not always when it's talking about suffering in the King James. Is that what it's talking about? Suffering.
I think of endurance.
Endurance, yeah. And doing it together. It's mutual. It's mutual. We have to be with Christ. We have to, as I put here, be faithful and remain loyal. And if we do that, we'll be glorified with Him. Glorified. What is that word? Honor. Magnify. Made full of glory. Okay? That's where we want to be, isn't it? I sure don't want to be not a child of God or not a joint heir with Christ. We talked about in the last series the devil, sin, and hell. If we sin, we're children of who? Okay, Satan, the devil. So if we're children of God, what are we not doing? We're not sinning. Now, we're not talking about not being sinlessly perfect. But we do have the right relationship with God that if we do sin, what can we do? Pray, repent, ask for forgiveness. We're in that kind of relationship. Yeah. Attitude and action. Yeah. Attitude and action.
Each Lord's Day, what are we doing when we're remembering Christ when we take that Lord's Supper? We're suffering with Him. In my opinion, we should be suffering with Him.
That emotion, that
suffering that He went through, we are remembering that. In a way, we should be suffering with Him in that understanding that He did that for us, in our place.
And I think when I look back at that word, the root of that word that's suffer, that's what it's talking about. It's mutual. It's together. We are maybe not put ourselves in that exact place, but we try to think and imagine what it was like, what He went through. And I think you're absolutely right. Is there a point in our week, in our month, in our year when we shouldn't be thankful and thinking about what Jesus did for us? That should be at the forefront of our mind and everything that we do. But why do we do this once a week? To focus in on, right? And to bring it back. Okay. Anything else? All right, 81. God commands us to... God commands us to... If you look at the Scripture, that's what it is, isn't it? Okay? Love our neighbor as ourselves, and then let's do this one too. The great first commandment, which was first, and then the other one was second, if you read it. So I don't know why they switched them up, but we're going to switch them back. The great first commandment, love God with all your heart, soul, mind. Okay? All right, 81 and 82. We are in Matthew chapter 22. Matthew 22, 37 and 38. And 39. Somebody got that? Read it for me. 38, 37, 38, 39.
This is the first great commandment, and the second is like unto it. Thou shalt love the neighbor as thyself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets.
Did we not go back far enough? Yeah, go back to 37, Stan.
Jesus said unto him, Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, and with all thy mind.
Yeah.
This is the first great.
And this was in response to a question. What's the greatest commandment? Boy, that'd be putting you on a spot, wouldn't it? But not if you're Jesus. He knew exactly where to go with it. Love God, and the second's likened to it. Love your neighbor. Now, next question is, who's my neighbor, right? That's what was asked. And then we have the parable, the story of the Good Samaritan. Okay, it's not the religious leader. It's not the people with power. It's someone that's in need. Samaritans. How did the Jews feel about the Samaritans? Didn't like them at all. Considered them half-breed dogs, if I remember correctly. But that's to Jesus says a neighbor. This man was in need. He'd been beaten by thieves, robbed and beaten by thieves. Okay. The Samaritan took care of him. I wonder if that had been reciprocal in the eyes of most Jews. Maybe not. Let's talk about it. All right. 81. Love of neighbor and of God. God commands us to love our neighbors as ourselves. Where do we normally and usually place ourselves in our benefit? Near or at the top? First? Lots of times. So that's what he's asking, or that's what he's telling them. Put others above yourself. Love your neighbor as yourself. Think about what's best for others. Think about what you can do to help someone else that's in need. Consider others equal to or even above ourselves. Then look at this. The first great commandment is, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. That's what we just read. So what does that mean? What's heart? Love God with all your heart. Feelings. Cardia. Sounds like cardiac, right? Cardia is a Greek word talking about your thoughts and your feelings, your passions. Okay? What about soul? Suke. That's the Greek word. Means breath. The very breath of your life is your soul. Vitality, that word implies. So you got your thoughts and feelings, you have your vitality, the very essence of your life, cardia and suke. What about mind? Okay? Similar to heart, it's thoughts, but it's the understanding part of it, isn't it? Coming to an understanding, reason, your mind. Dianoie, that Greek word. Okay, so you have your thoughts and feelings, the very breath of life, your vitality, your understanding, your imagination. Okay? And you're to love God with all of it, not just part, not just some, with all of these things. Doesn't leave anything out, does it? We're to love God with every part of our being. We're to love God in a way that no other love can compare, with our very life, if necessary. We don't live, for the most part, in that kind of situation that they were living in shortly after Jesus would make this statement. The church begins, they go through great persecution. We've already talked about Saul breathing murders and threatening murders, imprisoning people. We don't have to put up with that on a daily basis, do we? But if that was required of us, what should we be willing to do? Even with our very life, our physical life. Statement here at the end. We are to exert all powers of our body, soul, and mind into loving God. And when we do that, how are we going to treat other people? If we think about what God did for us, as bad as the Jews thought about the Samaritans, how does God feel about sin? And if we are involved in sin, a sinful lifestyle, we're a sinner, how does God feel about us? Yes, He still loves us, but can He have any part with us? God can't have part with sin. We can't have that relationship with Him. We need to put everything that we can into loving God, and we show that by loving, Jesus called it our neighbor, our fellow man, those that we come in contact with. That's what we should be doing. When one loves God with all of his heart, soul, and mind, he'll be always ready to do God's commandments. Do you agree with that? If you love God, decisions that need to be made, have to be made, oftentimes are already made, aren't they? They still may be difficult or hard, or you may struggle with it, but the decision's already made. If you love God, you're willing to body, mind, soul, heart, give it to God. Oftentimes those decisions are already made. Love his neighbor as himself. That's what we'll do if we love God. Why? Because God is that example for us. Jesus was that example for us. We're to follow them in their example. What would they do in that situation? Interesting point here. Verse 40. Look what it says. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. Interesting word there, hang. What do you think of? Something that's hung on the wall? I found an interesting point. If you hang something, it's suspended from above, isn't it? You can't hang something suspending it from below. So if these commandments hang all the law and the prophets, there's got to be something that it's supported by, suspended by. Here, use the word hang, hung by. What is that? It's God, isn't it? It's God and His justice, His righteousness, His purity, His holiness, His love. That's where it's at. The whole law, and God, and Jesus here is talking about, of course, the old law. But what we have in the New Testament goes right along with it, doesn't it? All right, questions or comments? All right, the church with many problems. Where was that at? The one we know and have recorded because they received a couple letters laid out there for history is the church in Corinth, the Corinthian church. All right. So we'll do 84 as well. This is what Paul wrote to the church in Corinth about. These were the problems that they were having. Factions, sexual immorality, lawsuits between brethren, marriage, improper conduct in worship, issues over spiritual gifts, the resurrection. I like this at the end. Other things. Okay? I've got it on the next slide, so I'm going to go ahead and advance it, and we'll just talk about these as we go through them. Church with problems. The Corinthian church was filled with problems. We said that 4 or 5 times. We know that. 1 Corinthians chapters 1 through 4, Paul talks about the division. Remember in the beginning, I've heard, that's what Paul said, I've heard that there are divisions among you, factions. Some were saying Paul's the best, Peter's the best, whoever. Paul's comment was, forget all that. Who should we be following? Jesus. Yeah, because Christ divided. Rhetorical question. That means it's a question that doesn't require an answer. They knew the answer. Is Christ divided? No. Church factions. Okay? There was sexual immorality in the church. It was so bad that a man had taken his father's wife. And the real sad thing about it was what? The church wasn't ashamed of it. Church wasn't ashamed. That's 1 Corinthians chapter 5. Lawsuits among the brethren. 1 Corinthians 6, the first part there. Shouldn't come to that, should it? But it was in Corinth. And what was the response from the outside world looking at that? What's the word? Reproach. It was a stain on the church because of the way that brethren were acting with these lawsuits. 1 Corinthians 7 talks about marriage and the husband-wife relationship. This is where Paul said, I wish you could be like me. Was he commanding that nobody should get married? Better. In what sense would it be better to not be married? Because of the times they were living in. A lot of responsibilities, isn't there? And so, Paul was stating he was able to do more work, he felt like. He probably knew that. Abstinence and celibacy, 1 Corinthians 7. Even their conduct in worship was inappropriate, 1 Corinthians 11. Using the Lord's Supper as a common meal. I don't know what happened there. They were having disputes over spiritual gifts. This comes to mind. Remember, they were, which one's better, which one's greater? 1 Corinthians 12 through 14. What does Paul tell them in chapter 13? Okay. Spiritual gifts are okay. They're going to go away, but what's going to remain? Love. Chapter 15, some were saying there was no resurrection. During his letter, 1 Corinthians and 2 Corinthians, Paul discusses these problems and then gives an answer or a solution I wrote here when he wrote to the church there in Corinth. All right, Christ gave Christians, what did he give them? Second Corinthians 5, 18 and 19 talks about the ministry of reconciliation. I don't know why that keeps doing that. Goes blank. What is reconcile? Reconciliation. I always think about someone sitting down back in the old days. I don't know how many people do this anymore, but sit down with their checkbook. They'd have the, back really old days, they'd get these canceled checks or the posted checks back from the bank. You get them in an envelope. You'd sit there and you'd go through and you'd make sure that what you wrote was what was taken out. And you reconciled your bank account. Brought it into balance. Okay? Brought the account into balance. That's reconciling. Okay? So how does that apply to Christians? When he says Christ gave Christians the ministry of reconciliation. Okay? To call back into union with God. And how was that done? It was done through Christ, wasn't it? It was to settle accounts or the balance. Balance up what's going on. We were sinners. We were in debt. What does Romans tell us about what we're going to be paid for sin? The wages of sin is what? That's the only wage. A wage is something you earn. That's what we earn by being in sin. The only way that could be balanced, or as the word here is reconcile, is through Christ's death. All things are God's. All things are God's. God made a way for us to be brought back to union with Him through Jesus' death. Christ reconciled the world to God by dying for our sins. So, what does that mean, this ministry of reconciliation? That means we have work to do. So what's our work? Because God and Jesus, we were reconciled back to God. So what should we be doing? If we've been reconciled, isn't our responsibility to work, to teach, to be the example that we should be so that we can reconcile men, the world, back to God? And that's what it's talking about. So Christ gave Christians the ministry of reconciliation. Because of His death, we were brought back in union, back in a relationship with God. And it's our responsibility then to teach the world, teach those around us what they should be doing so that they can be, once again, in that union with God. Your labor's not in vain. Churches that gave beyond their means. Churches of Macedonia, 2 Corinthians chapter 8. Collection was being taken up. Paul was going to distribute it. And these churches of Macedonia gave beyond their means. We'll discuss that. They gave beyond their means even though there was clear evidence that they were in need themselves. Call it here proof of affliction. The church of Macedonia gave liberally. Being a liberal, sometimes that has a bad connotation, doesn't it, anymore? Maybe not. But in our giving, we're supposed to be liberal. What does that mean? Generous, abundant, going beyond. Going beyond. So the church of Macedonia gave liberally, not just one church, but all the churches, or several of the churches that were in this area. Paul bore witness. He records it, recorded here in 2 Corinthians, and it was to be used as an example. These churches not only gave more than Paul wanted, but he said not only did they give of their money, but what did they do first? They'd given of themselves. Kind of goes back to 2 or 3 cards ago. Love God with all your heart, mind, and soul. These churches are an example for us today, something that we should follow. All right. 87. Each Christian is to give. There's about 5 things on here. We're going to hit them quick. As he's prospered, not grudgingly, not a necessity, cheerfully, as he purposed in his heart. This next slide. Anybody seen this before? After the prayer pops up on the screen as we're giving, this comes up on the screen a lot, doesn't it? Have you read it? Look what it says. Every man according to his purpose in his heart, so let him give, not grudgingly or of necessity, for God loveth a cheerful giver. Let's talk about that for a minute. Purposed in his heart. What does that mean? Pre-planned, budgeted, right? Purposed. You don't just look in your wallet, your purse, your pocket, and pull out something at the last. I know people do that, but that's not what we should be about, right? This verse tells us we are to plan, we're to budget, we're to set aside. Lots of places, it's a tenth, a tithing. It's not recorded anywhere. Be honest with you, a tenth ought to be compared to what we've been blessed. How much of it's God's anyway? All of it. So we think we're giving back to God and we're maybe just scratching the surface. Look at the next thing. Not grudgingly. I like the opposite of that. Not grudgingly, we should be giving how? Cheerfully. Okay? We should be glad to do it. We shouldn't think, oh man, I was going to stop by the grocery store on the way home and grab something. I was going to do this, I was going to do that with the money. And I'm not going to give so much this because I need to buy a new whatever it is. Okay? So we're going to plan, we're going to budget, we're going to do it cheerfully, not grudgingly, or of necessity. What's that? Feeling like you have to. I got to do it. And I can't spend this because I got to put it in the basket when it's passed. Yeah. Don't hold it up for everybody to see. We find out from Jesus' teachings, if you do that and you get the praise of men, you've already earned your reward, hadn't you? That's exactly what you're going to get. Okay. All right. Not grudgingly or necessity, for God loveth. Here's the opposite of that, grudgingly. God loveth a cheerful giver. I put these down there. Freely, generously, in appreciation for God's love. 1 Corinthians 16:2 also mentions something about giving. It says we are to give as we have been prospered. We hit on that just a minute ago, didn't we? How much of it's God's? How much do we have because of God? The answer to both of those is everything, right? Everything's God's, and everything that we have is because of God. If we're doing that, are we going to change what we've been putting in the collection basket? And we're talking about that because that was the context of the Macedonian churches. But what did Paul say they did first? They gave of themselves. Their effort, their time, everything that they had. Money probably ranks down here, doesn't it? If we're doing this, love God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind. Love your neighbor as yourself is second. How easy is this? We're already doing it. We're cheerful about it. We're not doing it because we have to. Anybody think last night before you went to bed, well, I better go to bed early because I got to go to church tomorrow? Change one letter from G-O-T to G-E-T. I get to go to church, worship service, and congregate and fellowship and worship God. Instead of, I can't do that because I've got to go to church tomorrow. Can't go to the golf course, can't go to the lake, can't stay in and sleep because I got to go to church. You see the attitude with that? I get to do it. All right. Lesson 10, I'll put it out on the board. 1 Corinthians, 2 Corinthians, Galatians, Ephesians. That's your reading for next week. Appreciate your attention. And we'll take a short break.